The air
And
in the
that's when it
family
happened.
courtroom was cold.
Go on.
And
He wasn't
smelled like
telling the
old
truth.
paper
Objection,
and
Your
cleaning
Honor.
spray. A 7-year-old girl sat on a big wooden bench that made her feet dangle high above the floor. She was like a small, quiet doll placed between two storms. On her right,
He was
sat
with
her
me the
father.
whole time.
He wore a stiff
He can tell
blue
you the
suit
truth.
and sat up very straight, his jaw
I saw
tight.
what happened.
On her left
The dog
her
was with
mother,
me.
whose
He helps
hands
me
would
feel
not stop
safe.
moving, twisting a tissue
today.
into a small.
I promise to
Sad
tell the
Not
truth,
thought the little
the
girl's
whole
name was
truth,
Maya.
and
But
nothing
in
but
that
the
room,
truth.
nobody said her name much. They talked about her like she was a problem to be solved. Words like custody and best interests and stable environment flew over her head like hard, confusing birds. At Maya's feet, lying perfectly still on the polished floor, was Atlas. He was a golden retriever with a calm, kind face and a thick red vest that had the words "Service Dog" in bold letters. He was her mother's official support animal for her anxiety. But to Maya, he was her island, her safe spot in a sea of grown-up anger. The judge, a woman with sharp glasses and hair tied in a firm bun, listened to the lawyers. Her eyes moved around the room, taking everything in. She saw the father's controlled frown. She saw the mother's trembling lip. And she saw the little girl, who was so still it was strange. Most children fidgeted, or cried, or looked around. This girl just stared at her own lap, one small hand resting on the head of the dog. "Your Honor," her father's lawyer said, his voice loud and sure. "My client offers a home of routine and discipline. A child needs structure, not a home where the primary caretaker relies on an animal for basic emotional support." Maya's mother made a small sound, like a gasp she tried to swallow. Her lawyer quickly put a hand on her arm. Maya didn't look up, but her fingers, hidden from the view of the lawyers and her parents, sank a little deeper into the fur on Atlas's head. She didn't pet him. She just held on, as if he were anchoring her to the world. The mother's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, the dog is a prescribed medical aid. It allows my client to be a fully present, attentive, and loving mother. Their home is filled with warmth." The father's idea of structure feels more like strict control to my client. A low argument began between the two men, their voices bumping into each other. The words "unfit" and "neglectful" were said. Maya's heart began to beat a fast, frightened rhythm against her ribs. She felt her father's body grow even more rigid beside her. She felt her mother start to cry softly. This was the worst part. The feeling of being pulled apart. Each word from the lawyers felt like a tug on her arms. Then, under the cover of the bench, unseen by anyone, Maya's fingers moved. It was a tiny, deliberate motion. She tapped her index finger 3 times, very lightly, against the top of Atlas's warm skull. It was a signal. A secret they had practiced many times in quiet afternoons. Atlas, who had been a fluffy statue, immediately responded. He let out a soft, deep sigh that only Maya could feel, and then he shifted his whole weight. He pushed himself more firmly against her legs, a solid, warm pressure that ran from her knees to her ankles. It felt like a heavy, living blanket. It was a trained, task-deep pressure therapy. It calmed the nervous system. Maya took a slow, shaky breath. The tight band around her chest loosened, just a little. The judge's eyes, which missed very little, flicked down. She had seen the dog move. She noted it, a dog adjusting its position. It wasn't strange. But something about the timing, the way the girl's body seemed to relax a fraction after the dog moved, stuck in the judge's mind. It was a tiny puzzle piece she didn't have a place for yet. The father leaned over then, putting his face close to Maya's ear. His voice was a low, angry whisper meant only for her. "See what she's doing?" he hissed, nodding toward her weeping mother. "This is why you belong with me. No drama, no dog, just quiet and order." Maya froze. The feeling of his breath on her ear, A sharpness in his whisper made her stomach clench. The safe feeling from Atlas's pressure began to fade, replaced by a cold fear. Her hand, still on Atlas, went stiff. The judge called for a short break. As people stood and stretched, Maya stayed perfectly still on her island, holding on to her dog, waiting for the next wave to hit. The 5-minute break was not a break for Maya. It was just a different kind of waiting. The grown-ups stood in little huddles near the back of the room. Her father's lawyer spoke to him in a low, confident voice, pointing at papers. Her mother was by the water fountain, taking small sips, her shoulders hunched. A kind court lady had offered Maya a juice box, but she just held the cold container, not opening it. Atlas remained pressed against her legs, a living, breathing anger. She kept her fingers woven in the fur behind his ear. If she let go, she was afraid she might float away. The judge came back in, and everyone shuffled to their places. The air felt even heavier now, like before a thunderstorm. "We will now hear from the mother directly," the judge said. Her voice echoing a bit in the quiet room. Maya watched her mother walk to the witness stand. She looked so small up there, like a child herself. She had to promise to tell the truth, her voice a tiny squeak when she said, "I do." Her own lawyer started with easy questions. "Can you tell the court about your typical day with your daughter?" Her mother's voice was shaky at first. She talked about making pancakes in the morning, about walking Atlas together, about reading stories at night. As she spoke about these normal, happy things, her voice grew a little stronger. A tiny, fragile smile even touched her lips when she mentioned how Maya would always save a little piece of pancake for Atlas. Maya felt a small warmth in her own chest. She remembered those mornings. The smell of syrup, the sound of Atlas's tail thumping on the kitchen floor. It felt like a story about another family, not them, here in this cold place. Then the other lawyer stood up. He was a tall man with a voice that didn't seem to have a quiet setting. He walked slowly toward the witness stand, a notepad in his hand. "These pancake mornings sound lovely," he began, but his tone was flat, not warm. "Now let's talk about the morning of April 14th. Do you remember that day?" Maya's mother blinked. Her hands, which had been resting on the ledge, started to twist together. I'm not sure." "Allow me to refresh your memory," the lawyer said, looking at his notes. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Gable, called the police at 7:15 a.m. She reported hearing what sounded like a panic attack through the open window. Sobbing, hyperventilating. The officers found you on the kitchen floor, unable to catch your breath, with your daughter present. Is that accurate?" The room seemed to suck all the air out. Maya's mother looked down, her face turning pale. "Yes," she whispered. "And was Atlas, the dog, able to prevent this severe episode?" He helped. He came and did his job. He grounded me. But he didn't prevent it," the lawyer pressed, his words like stones. "Your daughter, a 7-year-old child, had to witness her mother in a state of complete collapse. She had to wait for a dog to do what a parent should do, provide a sense of safety and control. It's not like that," Maya's mother said, her voice rising with a sob in it. "He does help me. He helps me be better. Or does he simply manage a condition that makes you fundamentally unreliable?" The lawyer shot back. Maya couldn't listen anymore. Her mother was crying up there, and the words unreliable and collapse bounced around in her head. Her father shifted beside her. He leaned over, his mouth so close to her ear it made her skin prickle. "You see?" he whispered, his voice hot and sharp. His hand came down and gripped her shoulder, not to comfort, but to hold her in place, to make her listen. "This is the drama. This is what I save you from. With me, it's clean. It's quiet. No screaming. No crying. No dog." His grip was tight. It didn't hurt Not exactly, but it felt like a cage. She couldn't move. She couldn't go to her mother. She was stuck. The fear from before came rushing back, cold and fast, like water flooding her chest. She couldn't breathe. Her hand, still resting on Atlas, moved on its own. It was pure instinct, a call for help from a place deeper than words. Tap, tap, 3 firm presses on the dog's head. Then, her finger drew a tiny, desperate circle on his back. Atlas reacted instantly. He lifted his head and nudged his wet nose firmly into the crook of the father's elbow, the one attached to the hand gripping Maya's shoulder. It was a firm, insistent push, a trained interruption. The father jerked his arm away with a startled, annoyed grunt. "Control your animal," he snapped under his breath, glaring at the dog. But Atlas wasn't done. Having created space, he then turned his big body and leaned his full weight, sideways this time, into Maya's side, sandwiching her gently, but firmly between his warm body and the hard wood of the bench. The deep pressure was everywhere now, steady and calm. From her high seat at the front, the judge had seen it all. She had seen the father's forceful whisper, the grip on the shoulder. She had seen the child's face go blank with fear. And she had seen, clearly this time, the deliberate little finger taps and the circle on the dog's back. She had seen the dog's immediate, precise response, first to disrupt the source of the stress, then to comfort the child. This was no accident. This was a conversation. A silent, urgent conversation between a girl and her dog that spoke louder than any lawyer in the room. The judge's pen, which had been steadily taking notes, stopped dead on the paper. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in intense, focused understanding. She looked from the terrified girl to the protective dog, to the annoyed father rubbing his arm. A whole new story, a true story, was being written right in front of her, in silent code. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. It wasn't the quiet of waiting. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something important breaks. The father's annoyed huff seemed to hang in the air. Maya's mother had stopped crying on the witness stand, her eyes wide and confused, fixed on her daughter and the dog. All eyes, however, slowly turned to the judge. She had taken off her glasses and was pinching the bridge of her nose, her eyes closed. For a long moment, she just sat there. The lawyers looked at each other, unsure. The father straightened his tie, his face hard. Maya kept her face buried in Atlas's neck, breathing in his familiar doggy smell. The only safe thing in the world, Then the judge put her glasses back on. She looked, not at the lawyers, but directly at Maya. "Young lady," she said. Her voice was firm but not unkind. It cut through the silence like a clear bell. Maya flinched, pressing closer to Atlas. She didn't look up. "It's all right," the judge said, her tone softening just a fraction. "I'm talking to you. Can you look at me for a moment?" Slowly, fearfully, Maya lifted her head. Her eyes were huge and glistening with held-back tears. The judge gave a small, careful nod. "Thank you. Now I see your dog's vest. He is a working dog, isn't he? A service dog?" Maya managed a tiny nod. "And he is trained to do specific jobs to help people, correct?" Another nod. The judge leaned forward just a little. "A moment ago, you touched your dog in a specific way. You tapped him, and you made a little circle, and then he moved to help you. Did you ask him to help you? With those touches?" Maya's lower lip trembled. She glanced sideways at her father. His expression was dark, a warning. She quickly looked back at the judge and gave the smallest, quickest nod yes. A murmur rippled through the room. The mother's hand flew to her mouth. The judge held up a hand for quiet. She kept her gaze on Maya. "You are not in trouble. You have done nothing wrong. In fact, you are very clever. You asked for help in a very quiet way. She paused, choosing her next words with great care. Is Atlas trained to help your mother? Or is he trained to help you? This question seemed to confuse Maya. She frowned, thinking. Her small voice, unused for so long, came out as a dry whisper. He helps Mama when she gets scared and can't breathe. I understand, the judge said. But the signal you used, the tap and the circle, who is that signal for? Who are you asking to help? Maya looked down at Atlas's head. She swallowed hard. For me, she whispered, so quietly the microphones barely caught it. It's for when I get scared and can't breathe. The truth of it landed in the room with a profound thud. This wasn't about the mother's anxiety anymore. This was about the child's. The judge sat back in her tall chair, letting that truth settle over everyone. She looked at the father, whose face had gone from dark to pale. She looked at the mother, who was staring at her daughter with a heartbroken, dawning understanding. She looked at the two lawyers, who were now completely still, their legal arguments suddenly seeming thin and useless. This court, the judge announced, her voice now filling every corner of the room, has just witnessed a medical alert. This child, using a pre-trained nonverbal signal, communicated a state of acute distress to her medical support animal. The animal then performed a precise, trained task to mitigate that distress. She paused, letting the clinical words sink in and transform what everyone had seen. This is not a pet being disobedient. This is a response. A documented, reliable response to a specific need. She turned her attention to the father's lawyer. Counsel, your entire argument rests on the premise that the mother's home is an unstable environment detrimental to the child's well-being. Yet, we have just seen clear, objective evidence of the child experiencing a peak of distress right here in this courtroom. And the source of that distress appeared to coincide not with her mother's testimony, but with an interaction with her father. The lawyer stood up quickly. Your Honor, I object. This is speculation. The child is clearly anxious about the proceedings overall. A perfectly natural. She used a targeted communication tool. The judge interrupted, her voice leaving no room for argument. She didn't cry out. She didn't call for her mother. She used a silent signal she had been taught for a specific kind of fear, and the dog responded to it. That is data. It is the most unbiased testimony I have heard all day. She looked back at Maya, who was watching her now. A tiny flicker of something other than fear in her eyes' confusion, maybe, or a faint, fragile hope. I am halting these proceedings, the judge declared. We will take a 1-hour recess, but not for the usual reasons. She pointed a firm finger at the child advocate, a gentle woman who had been sitting quietly near the back. I want this young lady and her dog to go with Miss Flores to a quiet room. I want her to have a snack. I want her to be comfortable. And then, if she is willing, I want to understand these signals. All of them. Her gaze swept over the parents. This child has found a way to speak when words are too hard. This court needs to listen. Court is adjourned for 1 hour. With a sharp crack of her gavel, a sound echoed in the stunned silence. The father slumped back in his seat, running a hand over his face. The mother wept silently, her eyes locked on her daughter. The lawyers began frantically shuffling papers, their strategies in ruins, but Maya just wrapped her arms around Atlas's neck. The judge had seen. The judge had understood. Someone had finally heard the secret she and her dog had been shouting in silence all along. For the first time that day, the air in her lungs felt like her own. The quiet room was nothing like the courtroom. It had a soft, blue carpet and a small, squashy sofa with flowers on it. There was a picture of a sunny meadow on the wall. The child advocate, Miss Flores, had brought in a box of animal crackers and a juice box with a bendy straw. She sat in a chair across from the sofa, not too close, giving Maya and Atlas space. "Take your time, sweetheart," Miss Flores said. Her voice was warm, like a teacher Maya had liked in kindergarten. "No one is going to rush you. This is just for you to have a break." Maya sat on the edge of the sofa, her legs still dangling. Atlas settled on the floor in front of her, his head in her lap, a living weight that kept her from floating away. She opened the juice box and took a small sip. The sweet, cold taste was a surprise. It tasted like a normal day. For a long while, they just sat, as Flores didn't ask questions. She just let the quiet be quiet. She watched the little girl and the dog, seeing how Maya's fingers never stopped moving in the dog's fur, as if she were reading a story written there. "His name is Atlas," Maya said suddenly. Her voice small in the quiet room. "Ms." Flores smiled. "That's a strong name. Like he holds up the world." Maya nodded slowly. "Mama says he holds up our hearts when they feel too heavy." "That's a beautiful way to put it," Miss Flores said. She leaned forward just a little. "The judge, she asked me to see if you'd be willing to show her what you and Atlas can do. The secret signals. Only if you want to. You don't have to." Maya's fingers stopped moving. She looked at the door, as if she could see the courtroom waiting on the other side. She thought of her father's dark look, her mother's tears. Then she looked down at Atlas's trusting face, his brown eyes watching her patiently. He had helped her. He had told the truth when she couldn't. The least she could do was explain his language. "Okay," she whispered. "Ms." Flores gave a gentle nod. "Can you show me one? The one you used in there, when you were feeling scared on the bench?" Maya took a deep breath. She lifted her hand and held it over Atlas's head. She looked at Miss Flores to make sure she was watching. Then, very deliberately, she tapped her finger 3 times on the top of his skull. Tap, tap, tap. Atlas immediately let out a soft huff and shifted his weight, pushing his body more firmly against her legs and the sofa. A solid, comforting pressure. "That's his hold steady job," Maya explained, her voice gaining a tiny thread of confidence. "For when the scary feelings are inside me, when my heart is beating too fast." "I see," Miss Flores said, her eyes understanding. "And the circle?" Maya's hand moved again. She drew a small, slow circle on Atlas's shoulder blade. In a flash, Atlas lifted his head. He turned and gently nudged his nose against Maya's elbow, pushing it lightly. Then he looked toward the empty space beside her on the sofa, as if pointing. "That one is make space," Maya said. Her voice dropped again. "For when someone is too close. And I feel stuck." Miss Flores felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She kept her voice very calm. "Those are amazing signals, Maya. You are a wonderful team." "Are there more?" Maya bit her lip. She glanced at the door again, then back at Atlas. She gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. She held her flat hand, palm down, over his back, and moved it in a slow, side-to-side wave. Atlas instantly rolled onto his side, offering his belly. He let his tongue loll out in a goofy, relaxed way. Maya almost smiled. "That's silly time, for when the quiet feels too loud. He does something funny to make me laugh." The brilliance of it, the heartbreaking brilliance, washed over Miss Flores. This wasn't just a dog doing tricks. This was a complex, non-verbal language built for survival. A vocabulary for fear, for invasion, for overwhelming silence. This child had built a lifeline. "And does Atlas ever tell you things?" Miss Flores asked carefully. "Does he have a way to let you know if he sees you getting upset before you even know it?" Maya nodded enthusiastically. "If he sees me chewing my sleeve or holding my breath, he comes and puts his paw on my foot. Just a heavy paw. That's his 'I'm here' signal. So I remember to breathe. Miss Flores wrote nothing down. She just listened, etching every word into her memory. After a while, she asked, "Who taught you and Atlas these signals? Was it your mom?" Maya shook her head. Mama taught him his big jobs, for the big noises and the hard breathing. The lady who trained him, she showed me the little ones, the secret ones. She said they were just for me and Atlas, for my inside weather. For my inside weather. The phrase was so perfect, it hurt that the hour was nearly up. Miss Flores knew the judge was waiting. "Maya," she said softly, "would you be willing to show the judge what you just showed me? So she can understand, truly understand, how you and Atlas talk." Maya pulled Atlas's head into her lap and hugged him. She hid her face in his fur for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were serious, older than 7. "Yes," she said. So she knows Atlas is telling the truth. Back in the courtroom, the air was tense with waiting. The judge sat patiently. She watched as Maya, Atlas, and Miss Flores re-entered. The little girl looked different. Not less scared, but more resolved. She held her head a little higher. Mrs. Flores approached the judge's bench and spoke quietly for a few minutes. The judge listened, her expression growing more and more grave, then deeply sad, then fiercely protective. Finally, the judge spoke to the entire room. "This court will now hear a demonstration of a communication system this child uses to navigate her world." She looked at Maya. "Whenever you are ready." And in the silent courtroom, with everyone watching, a little girl began to speak with her hands. And her dog, her faithful furry voice, answered for her, telling a story no lawyer had ever thought to ask about. The silence in the courtroom was complete. It was the kind of silence where you could hear the hum of the lights, the rustle of a shirt as someone breathed. All eyes were on the little girl and the golden dog in the center of the room. Maya stood beside Atlas, her small hand resting on his vest. The judge had come down from her high seat and stood a few paces away, her arms folded, watching with careful eyes. The parents and lawyers were frozen in their places, spectators to a conversation they were only now beginning to understand. "Start with 'hold steady,' please," the judge said gently. Maya nodded. She lifted her other hand and with a clear, deliberate motion, tapped 3 times on Atlas's head. Tap, tap, without a moment's hesitation. Atlas leaned his full weight against Maya's legs, bracing her. A low, soft sigh escaped him, a sound of pure focus. Maya took a deep, visible breath, as if she had just been given permission to fill her lungs. "I see," the judge murmured, more to herself than anyone. "And make space?" Maya's finger drew a small, slow circle on his shoulder. Atlas immediately turned and nudged his nose firmly against the judge's hand, which was resting at her side. He didn't nip or jump. It was a polite, persistent push. Then he looked pointedly at the space beside Maya, as if to say, "Step back, please." A ripple of astonished whispers went through the room. This was not a trick. This was communication. The judge complied, taking a respectful step backward, a look of profound respect on her face. Remarkable. For the next few minutes, the courtroom became a stage for a silent language. Maya showed silly time, and Atlas rolled over with a playful grunt. She showed the "I'm here" signal she said he gave her, and he lifted a paw to place it gently on top of her shoe. Each signal was a window into a private world of need and response. It was a map of a little girl's fears and comforts, drawn in the air with her fingers and answered with unwavering loyalty. When it was over, Maya wrapped her arms around Atlas's neck, burying her face in his fur, spent. The dog licked her cheek once, a quick, reassuring swipe. The judge walked slowly back to her bench. She did not sit down immediately. She stood, looking at the parents. The mother's face was streaked with quiet tears, her hand over her heart. The father sat rigidly, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the floor in front of him. He looked like a man who had just seen a wall he built crumble to dust. The judge's voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but carried absolute authority. It wasn't the sound of a verdict being read, but of a truth being acknowledged. "This court," she began, "has heard many words today. Arguments about stability, about anxiety, about fitness. But the most important testimony came without a single spoken word. It came from a child who has developed, out of necessity, a language of safety. A language she uses to survive moments of profound distress." She turned her gaze to the father. "Sir, your argument was for a home of quiet and order, but the evidence shows that your daughter associates that quiet with a fear so deep. She has a secret signal for it, a signal for when she feels trapped and cannot breathe. The dog's response is not to a chaotic environment, but to a restrictive one. Your touch in this very room triggered a medical alert." The father opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He closed it again. The judge then looked at the mother. "Ma'am, your home has been presented as unstable. Yet, it is in that home that this intricate, loving language of care was built. It is there that your daughter feels safe enough to teach and to be understood by this animal. The dog's primary function may be for you, but his deepest bond, his most urgent duty, is to her. You provided the tool. She built the bridge." The judge sat down now, placing her hands flat on the desk. "My ruling is as follows." You could have heard a pin drop. "The petition for a change of primary custody is denied. The father will retain visitation rights, but they will be supervised for a period of no less than 6 months. He will also be required to complete a series of parenting classes focused on child-led emotional communication." She paused, letting that settle. The mother began to sob quietly, this time with relief. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the service dog, Atlas, is hereby formally recognized by this court as a necessary medical support device for the child's well-being. He is to accompany her to all visitations, and his signals and responses are to be respected as a valid communication of her needs. Any interference with this animal performing its duties will be considered a violation of this order." She looked one last time at Maya, who was now watching her, a look of fragile hope dawning in her eyes. The law seeks the best interest of the child. Today, the child herself showed us what that is. It is the freedom to say, "I am scared," without making a sound. It is the right to have that fear heard and answered. This case is closed. The sharp crack of the gavel was the final word. The father stood up abruptly and walked out, his lawyers scrambling after him. The mother rushed forward, falling to her knees and wrapping her arms around her daughter and the dog in one trembling embrace. The judge gathered her papers. As she left the bench, she paused beside them. She didn't say anything to the adults. Instead, she looked down at Maya and gave her a small, solemn nod. "Good job, team," she said softly. And then she walked away. Later, in the parking lot under a gray sky, Maya climbed into the back seat of her mother's old car. Atlas jumped in beside her, his tail thumping against the seat. As her mother started the engine, Maya didn't look back at the big, scary courthouse dot. She put her hand on Atlas's back, not to give a signal of fear or a need for space. This time, she just rested it there, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Her mother looked at them in the rearview mirror, her eyes red but clear. "Where should we go, my brave girl?" Maya thought for a moment. She thought of pancakes and quiet mornings and stories on the sofa. She thought of a world where her inside weather could be spoken and heard. "Home," she said. And for the first time in a very long time, the word felt light and warm and true. Atlas licked her hand, as if to seal the promise. They drove away, leaving the silence of the courtroom behind for the quiet understanding of the road ahead.